Hi, everyone. Welcome. If you are joining us today, thank you for taking the time. We're all very excited to talk about our favorite topic, property taxes. I'm just giving everyone a minute or two to join while we are waiting. If you could drop in the chat where you are joining us from today. This is our favorite tradition is in the first 3 minutes. I love to see where everyone is tuning in from. We have Tim joining us from Katy. I love seeing some of these names. Some of these are frequent attendees of our events. Sugarland, Jersey Village, Kingwood, love it. Cypress. Oh my goodness, so many. Pearland, Sugarland, Southgate. And as you know, Claire Goodman is joining us today. She is our senior reporter who covers Katy. So I love seeing all the people joining us from Katy. No doubt, Claire, some of your readers.
You're my neighbors. Hi, guys.
All right, let's live in Richmond, work in Houston. Love that. Very familiar with that commute, actually. All right, and as a reminder, we want this to be an interactive webinar. At the very end, we'll have time for reader questions. So if you have a pressing question to ask Mr. Altinger or Mr. Wise, please drop them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. Oh, and I see we already have some questions, so that's great. All right, let's give everyone about 1 more minute to join us. All right, Seabrook in the house, Missouri City, Summerwood, Spring. And just as an FYI, I believe only the panelists can see the questions in the chat. So if there is something that you don't want to share widely, rest assured, not everyone will be able to see your information and where you're tuning in from if that's a concern of yours. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us. Welcome everyone. Please, if you have a question for our guests, drop them in the chat and we will try to get to them at the end of this webinar. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started. Claire, why don't you take it away?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And especially Roland and Jordan, you guys, we appreciate you being here and sort of demystifying some of the property tax process. And these numbers can seem really nebulous to, the average taxpayer like myself. So being here is really helpful to us and to our readers. So I guess, my first question for you guys, when I was doing the reporting on this, something that really struck me was how much you guys really are there to help, that you do want this process to be fair. You're not just this scary entity that's out there trying to tax people. If you do believe that you've been unfairly valued, you guys encourage protesting. Can you speak to that, Roland?
Sure. First of all, I'm the chief appraiser in Harris County, and I want to thank you all for allowing us to join you. And with regards to the things that Mr. Wise and I will talk about, these are actually state laws, so they apply across all 250 counties in the state. And when you look specifically at Harris County, we are the largest appraisal district in the galaxy that does a complete reappraisal every year, and we appraise roughly 1.9 million parcels. With that being said, we're not omnipotent and omniscient. We do make some errors, and that's why we welcome the protest process to your viewers and to anyone that feels that their value is overvalued. And right now, we have just sent out about 1.2 million residential notices, and we're starting to mail out all the commercial notices. So people are getting those in the mail and they're wanting to know what to do. And with that being said, we can talk about the protest process, but valuing that many properties, you're going to make some errors, and we want people to feel welcome to come in and utilize our systems that we've established in Harris County to actually file a protest on their property and go through the process.
Excellent. Jordan, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Just to echo some of what Roland said is we really are here to serve the public and work with the public. And I know both of our offices have, over the last handful of years, really spent a lot of effort on trying to improve our services and the accessibility to the public. And so traditionally, maybe it was that you had to come to our office or mail items to us. Now we've shifted for almost everything we do to online services so that people can interact with us from the comfort of their own home, or while they're at work, they can submit documentation or exemptions applications or even their appeals online. And we just want to make sure that that is as easy and accessible to everybody as possible.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. So thank you. Regarding those appraisal numbers, when you open up your appraisal and you see this number that you guys have assigned for our homes, where are you getting that number from? Because what's it based on when you send us an approval? And similarly, if we see our numbers change, what are some reasons that we could see, explaining that change? Jordan, if you don't mind.
Sure. So it's a great question. It's one we get quite frequently. One of the things that we have to do is state law requires that all of our appraised values be at 100% of market value. And then from that, all values must be fair and equitable, meaning that all property types, types of property owners are paying their fair share of value, that it's being at market value. So when we do that, we look at the traditional rules of market value. It's what a willing buyer, willing seller would agree to on that price under normal conditions. So for most of maybe your readers, we're looking at, let's call it residential properties. And we are looking at sales of properties in their neighborhood or their market areas. We're also looking at what's driving market values, if it's, again, the number of bedrooms or other features, looking at other factors like maybe a swimming pool, or over the last handful of years, we've seen a lot of folks, even though it's always hot in Houston, it seems like, doing outdoor kitchens or outdoor living spaces. And so a lot of times those items are driving value. But foundationally, we're looking at those transactions, what's happening in the market, and what are participants willing to sell a property for, and participants willing to buy a property for.
And I love something that you mentioned about any improvements that you've made to your house, because this is something I didn't know until I started interviewing you guys. But like when you file a permit to do something to your house, like when I put in my pool, that's how you get that information. I don't know, I thought y'all had drones or something going around looking, but apparently it's based on actual solid paperwork. Roland, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just elaborate a little bit more with regards to the three approaches to value. You've got the cost, the market, and the income. With residential properties, it's majority used with the market, with what's actually being done by the buyers and sellers in the market. And for the last 2 years, or last 2.5, 3 years, we've seen an unbelievable increase in values because of the interest of being here, the inventory being low. And the last few years, we've raised values in Harris County significantly. And this year, we have now seen some slowdowns, at least in our county. And we're not seeing the increases across the board. And we've got the figures, if you want to get into that, of the values here in Harris County, of how many we actually lowered their values this year. People just say we automatically raise values 10% every year, and they're confusing that with the cap, that if you have your homestead and your property's capped at 10%. But we actually do the market value on all those properties every year. And if someone is capped, that means they have a homestead and they're limited for tax purposes at 10%. Yeah,
that's really good to know. And I was a little surprised you shared those numbers with me in a story that we did previously. And yeah, to see how many stayed the same or went down, I was kind of surprised by that. Moving into protesting taxes, let's say I've decided, this is really just too high. I don't think this is fair. And I'm looking at pursuing protesting my taxes. What's probably the most important thing to know before you get started in this process? Roland, did you have an opinion?
Yeah, well, what I'd like to say, and Claire, I hate to correct you on this, you're really not protesting your taxes. You're protesting the market value of your property. And that's the big misnomer. People come in there and they come into our office and they say, I can't afford these taxes. That's not the statute that we're required to do. As Jordan mentioned earlier, we're there to place the market value on that property. And that's what they're actually doing, is they're saying my house is not worth $100,000. Here's some reasons why. They're going to provide us an estimate. Maybe they need foundation repairs done on their property, and then we will look at that evidence to then lower that market value of that property if it was at $100,000 to account for the foundation errors that are actually with that property.
And thank you for pointing that out. I will probably use incorrect jargon frequently because I am not a tax expert, so I appreciate that. Jordan, did you want to add anything to that, like an overarching thought that people should keep in mind before they begin the process?
One thing I would add is make sure you do it timely. There is a deadline to file your appeal of your value. We also noticed properties in Fort Bend County over the last week or two. And so for most homeowners, most business owners, their protest deadline is going to be May 15th. And so that is, it's a hard deadline that's set in law. If a county notices a little bit later, then folks have 30 days after that notice is sent. So I know Roland has a batch of properties that were noticed a little bit later. So their deadline is going to be May 20th. So take a look at your notice of appraised value. Make sure you recognize the deadline there and get your appeal in on time. The only other item I would add is, there's the cliche that a picture, tells 1,000 words or 1,000 stories. And if you have pictures of foundation damage or pictures of other items that require, I would say, a significant level of repair that are really going to impact a property's value, that is the type of evidence that we like to see that's very helpful along with those cost estimates.
That's perfect. And that kind of leads into my next question. And Jordan, this is something that you and I had discussed when we did the original story. But when you are talking about challenging your appraisal, there are some issues that the appraisers are going to look at more heavily than others. And you kind of mentioned foundations, things like that. What are some other things that are big ticket items that they pay attention to? And are there anything that you homeowners might intuitively think would matter, but aren't very heavily weighted on your end?
Sure. So as Roland said, we value a lot of properties every year, and we do make mistakes. We tell the public in Fort Bend, you know your property better than anybody else. And if you are in a position to let us know what we don't know. So if you have that foundation issue, if you have significant issues with a roof or let's say a bathroom that's not functional, those are the kind of things that will impact a value. If you have maybe an aging AC unit or I still have Formica counters, that may not move the needle in the same way. It really is, what is the market looking at? What are the items that are really driving value versus those that somebody may look at and say, that's just deferred maintenance. My carpets are 10 years old. Understood, but that's not going to really have a major impact on somebody's market value.
Thank you. And Roland, did you have anything to add?
Well, the only thing I would add is it's all about the principle of contribution. And if you have some of those things that diminish the value of your property that you feel would diminish the value if you're a buyer or seller in the marketplace, bring those to our attention. As for example, people say, well, I didn't do any improvements on my property and they didn't make any change. Well, some of those improvements are picked up because the market is increasing. But when we talk about the word improvement, sometimes people will put on a fence on their property. If all the properties in the neighborhood have fences, we don't pick up that fence. However, if you're going to add a pool to your property, we're going to pick up that pool, and that pool is going to be based on what the contribution for that pool in that specific neighborhood is. A lot of people will go out there and spend $50,000 on a pool. That doesn't mean that their property's worth $50,000 more. It might be worth 25 to 35% more. And that's that principle of contribution. The same thing holds true with regards to if there's something wrong with your property, what is it? And bring it to our attention and let us, when you meet with our appraisers one-on-one, to look at that evidence as pictures, as Mr. Wise had mentioned, and also estimates of repair. And then we'll make an assessment on that and make adjustments to what we call our property record card. And that could then bring down that market value and get that correct. You know, I tell people a lot of properties out there we value just for residential, that 1.2 million that I mentioned. The majority of those we get, and we get the right value. However, in areas where you've got some gentrification going on, Mr. Jordan Wise mentioned those Formica tops, and you know, you go into some of those older neighborhoods and there's that gentrification going on, it brings in a whole different value. You know, that might have that green Formica countertop, but in that neighborhood, maybe when someone buys that property, they're not going to remodel that property. They're going to tear it down and build a new one, kind of like what they did in West University years ago. And then some areas they'll go through, and like in the Heights, you saw a big time a period where they were doing the remodeling on some of those old bungalows and adding bathrooms and things of that nature. So it is a difficult job. What chief appraisers have to do across the state is to establish that market value, and that's why we invite property owners to come in if they feel the value's incorrect.
So talking about the review process, when you just said, you know, coming in and sort of stating your case, I know you guys, every county is different. You've got Harris and we've got Fort Bend. I know every process is different, but is there anything that people can kind of generally expect to do when they go before the review board? Roland, if you want to start us out.
Okay, sure. I'll start us up. In Harris County, we do what we call an informal meeting with all property owners, and we give them the right to come in so they're not intimidated. They meet with an appraiser one-on-one. They sit down and we try to resolve the value. With regards to property owner protests, we settle about 75 to 80% of those at that point in time. Now, if you're one that does not settle in that informal meeting, we then do what the law says you're supposed to do, and that's get you in front of an appraisal review board. An appraisal review board is made up of citizens from the community. They sit on panels of 3 in Harris County. They listen to the case that the property owner presents. They listen to the case that the appraisal district presents, and then they render an opinion of value. And there's, of course, post appeals that we can discuss. However, the main thing is what I tell people: these are citizens. You do not need to be intimidated. They're just people. They put their pants on, dresses on, just like everybody else. Bring your evidence. Bring it, copies for those appraisal review board members. They ask for a few copies so each member can have one. Be methodical with what you're going to present at that hearing. You know, I've got this wrong with my property. Here's the evidence. Here's the pictures. Here's the estimates for repair. And then let the ARB ask questions. The appraisal district will present their evidence based on what they have. And then the appraiser will render an opinion. And then finally, the ARB will issue the final opinion on that value. But you do not need to be intimidated. I know a lot of people sit there and think that I need to hire a tax consultant, and this tax consultant's a lawyer. You know, tax consultants are under the TDLR, which is the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. They do it for you. You can do this yourself, and we're not there to protect the tax base. We're there to fairly allocate that tax burden. So we welcome them in Harris County, and I know that Jordan does in Fort Bend.
Yeah, Jordan, do you want to add to that?
Sure. The process is intended to be as informal as possible, meaning we want folks to feel comfortable coming in. I know sometimes it can be intimidating to walk into an office and maybe talk to an appraiser or present in front of the appraisal review board. And our offices, along with the statewide association, we've worked with folks in Austin to try to provide additional options to the public. And through that, we have a process now where if somebody would rather go to their ARB hearing, and instead of it being in front of a 3-member ARB panel, they just want to meet with a single ARB member, single member panel is what that's called, they have that option. They also have the option now in both of our counties to appear in front of the appraisal review board by a virtual hearing. So they can do it just like we're meeting today. Because we also understand people have jobs and responsibilities outside of their daily life, and they may not be able to spend the time to come down to the office to have that meeting, but we want to make sure that they feel like they can still have their due process and meet with, whether it's an appraiser or the appraisal review board, they can meet with them in a way that's comfortable and accessible to them.
Thank you. And Roland, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to add, yes, Jordan, I forgot about the one-member panel ARB members and the comforts of your home. I mean, literally, we all, both Jordan and myself, we have the process where you can file your protest on iFile online. You can try to settle online. And then, of course, you can do your hearing online, whether it's the informal meeting or the formal meeting, all online. I mean, we're like the Baskin Robbins of appraisal districts. And it is, I don't want the folks to feel intimidated. That's not the issue here. We want them to come in and make sure that the value on their property is correct.
And so you had mentioned this in the last question, and it's also a question I've gotten a lot from readers and something we've addressed in a recent story that we published yesterday, I want to say. And that is, what do you guys think about hiring somebody to do the protest for you? Benefits, drawbacks, and also just your personal opinion, Roland?
Well, I tell people that they're coming in, you might be a little emotional about it, but you can do this yourself. If you decide to hire a property tax consultant, they have to, if they're on a contingency fee and they're asking for a 50% contingency fee or 25, and I'm just using 50, most of them will charge a flat fee or anywhere between 25 and 35%. But that means they would have to get it that much lower. So I think with regards to houses, I tell people, my friends, do this yourself. It's not that difficult.
That's nice to hear. Jordan, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. That, the tax agents have a role in the process, and we do a lot of work with the agents. In fact, they typically represent between 75 and 80% of every appeal that's filed. That being said, I tell property owners all the time, you know your home or your business better than anybody else. And I think that can be really powerful when meeting with an appraiser or presenting in front of the ARB.
And just kind of as a follow-up that popped into my head, do you feel like that there is a better chance of success using somebody, or in your experience and in what you've seen anecdotally even, or is it about the same?
I'd have to look at the data, but
okay.
I know in the past,
It's Jordan. Did we lose Jordan?
I'm not sure. It might just be taking a minute. Roland, if you want to pick it up while we wait for him to get back on.
Well, I think Mr. Jordan Wise was talking about running the data. We would obviously have to run the data for last year to give specific statistics. But I will tell you this, with regards to the process of the 1.9 million parcels we appraised, we get 500,000 protests. And about 75% of those are represented by tax consultants, and the residual 25% are represented by property owners themselves. For us to do what's required, we have to approve those records. And so the chief appraiser can certify that role. And so the tax consultants come in and they can do a lot more hearings in a day. So they're important and integral to us doing our job also. But with regards to property owners, we want to spend more time. One of our core values is first-class customer service. So when a property owner comes in, we will spend a little bit longer with them because they're not familiar with the process. We'll explain the process to them. And in that process, they get to learn something about it. And we do a lot of outreach. And what I would ask the viewers right now, we just put on our website all the outreach programs that we have, where property owners can go and speak about talk about the exemptions, talk about the protest process, and meet with appraisers and folks within the office. So I just tell people, do it yourself and learn about it. It's a rewarding process. Jordan, we lost you for a second.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you. It's the wonders of technology. I'm sure Roland gave a great answer, but at the end of the day, I think we are service organizations and we want to work with the public and meet them where they are and listen to them. And in any way we can do that, we are definitely open to.
So this question is less about the property taxes as they're appraised and more in a general sort of current events type question. But as you guys know, in the most recent legislative session, Texas passed a record $18 billion property tax package. And a lot of that, it comes in the form of some extensions, some exemptions that trickle down directly to homeowners. I know there's a lot of information. It's a very loaded package, but are there any of those exemptions, specifically the homeowners exemption, that people should be utilizing, and how can that impact their tax rate or their tax, I guess, yeah, tax rate? We'll go with that. Jordan, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. So I can kick that one off. So for a residential property owner, if you own and occupy your house, you live in it, you are entitled to a residence homestead exemption. And in effect, what this does is really two things. It does kind of act as a coupon, if you will. It reduces the amounts of value that you will pay taxes on. And so as a part of that legislation, let's say your school district portion, it used to be that was a $25,000 exemption, and then it was raised to $40,000. But with this most recent legislative package, it's now increased to $100,000, meaning if you have a $250,000 house, then you will only pay taxes on $150,000 of that value. With that residence homestead exemption as well, you have the benefits of the homestead cap, something that Roland mentioned earlier, where even if your market value increases, your appraised value can only increase by 10% a year. And that's designed to help provide some relief to property owners in years when markets are rapidly increasing, which we've seen over the last handful of years. Beyond that, there's different flavors of exemptions. A big one for many folks in the community is if you're over 65, you're entitled to an over 65 exemption, which provides additional relief as well as freezes the school district portion of your values. And I don't want to take all the fun about property tax relief. So if Roland wants to fill in some gaps, he can talk about some of those programs as well.
Well, as you know, Jordan, you and I spent a lot of time up in Austin during the legislative session, and this was Senate Bill 2 that provided the $18 billion in property tax relief, and it basically was for school districts to increase that amount. In fact, Jordan being the younger buck between the two of us, I remember when the school district exemption was $5,000, then it went to $15,000, then it went to $40,000, where he started off, where now it's at $100,000. But the thing that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention that's on this that's viewing this, is one thing that Senate Bill 2 brought also is a county of a certain size will now have an election, and there will be an election May 4th where the public will be electing 3 members that will sit on the Appraisal District's board of directors. And there are 3 places, place 1, place 2, and place 3 in Harris County. I tell people, hey, go out and vote. It's an important thing. It's a right that we're given. And they will be on our board from the public. And that was one of the other things that I wanted to mention that came out of Senate Bill 2. Not only was the property tax relief, but it also brought a different makeup of the board of directors, at least in, I know it's Harris County, Fort Bend, Chambers, Brazoria, Montgomery, because all the neighboring counties will all have that election come May 4th. So if people are listening, they need to, the League of Women Voters just put out a notice, and it has everyone's qualifications, at least in Harris County, for those people running for the 3 different places. So I'd suggest them to go to that and exercise their constitutional right and go vote.
Awesome. Awesome. Love that. Okay, so I think now we will switch over some questions from the audience that came through the wire.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say too, thank you. I'm seeing so many questions, so, and to the point where it feels like like a ticker. So we won't be able to get to everyone's questions, but we are trying. I'm trying to see common themes and ask the most commonly asked ones. So, one commonly asked question is just, if we look at like the neighborhood, like how is it like, and this is, I guess, more in the nuts and bolts of how these appraisals came to be. What is it about, like, are you looking at values in the neighborhood? One common question I'm seeing is like, is this the appraisal value? Is it the same as the homeowner value and the sale of the house. Can you kind of explain or shed a little more light? It seems like a lot of people are confused about just how this comes to be with the appraisal value. Let's
Sure.
start with Jordan. Yeah, go ahead.
So I jumped in there, Jennifer. So we are required to value properties as of January 1st each year. So that is the effective date of our appraised values. And predominantly what we are doing is we are looking at market areas and neighborhoods, typically neighborhoods within those market areas. Think about those maybe as neighborhoods within like a school district. You have, let's say your different elementary schools are zoned to different neighborhoods. So we may be looking at them in a similar way. And we are looking at a combination of sales activity and as well as some cost information, what's happening if people are wanting to do updates or remodels to their house. And then we will look at typically properties that are similar size to your property. So looking at square footage and then looking at some of the other features. And that's at a high level, that's what we're looking at. Those neighborhoods, sometimes people will say, well, my street values are this, but the person on the street behind me is different. For most cases, we're going to say those are the same neighborhood, unless you live, on a particularly unique street.
That's great. I'm also seeing a lot of questions about the over 60 exemption. And I know, Roland, you touched on that a little bit, but I'm seeing questions like, if one spouse is over 60 or a 6-year over and the other is not, can you claim that exemption? Or if you have an elderly parent that's moved in, to your home, is that something that you could use to claim that exemption? I'm going to go to you, Roland, since you mentioned the exemption first.
Okay, well, the exemptions are very clear in the statute. You have to own and occupy. So anybody that is on that mortgage, meaning that husband and wife, whoever gets to 65 first can claim that exemption for that property. However, I mean, my mother's passed, but if my mother were alive and I were to bring her into my house, I would have to put her on the property. So you could not claim that. But with regards to over 65, I think the benefits are better than a homestead. And I know Jordan mentioned that it freezes your school tax liability, but it also opens up other venues such as the portability. I didn't know this, but I've got folks and they have decided later on in life to give up that house and move to a smaller one. And with someone that's over 65 that spent most of their time in one property, they can port the percentage of the school tax to any other school district in the state of Texas. So let's just say someone's been living in this house for 30 years and the tax rate's gone up, the market value's gone up, and the school tax, what they would have been paying, what they were paying versus what they would pay without the exemption, it creates a pro rata share. And for simplistic purposes, if the property was paying $500 in school taxes, but they should be paying $1,000, they can port that 50% to any other school district in the state. And that is something that the appraisal district issues when that property owner downsizes. And we issue 3,000 to 4,000 of those a year. And a lot of people aren't aware of that. And that's one of the things that we push on the process of when we go out and talk to the citizens about exemptions. So the over 65 is a great exemption. And it's easy to claim because if we've got that information on our record when you applied for your homestead, we know it. We just granted a couple thousand over 65 exemptions without the property owner having to do it because we had that information in our records. But still check because we send out the card, and the legislature changed it where we cannot have that over 65 exemption displayed on our website because you had a lot of marketers out there were doing screen scrapes off the data that we have and marketing, the senior folks. So they will have to look when they get the confirmation card from us at the end of the year or call our office just to make sure it's there. That's
fantastic. And I'm curious too, if I'm protesting in this, I haven't protested in years past, and this is is it ever too late? Like, is it ever too late to say, if I've never done it, I've kind of just always accepted because, life happens and I get busy. Is it ever kind of too late to start that process or to do it for the first time? Even if some of the changes have been kind of old or, you know, I don't know. I'm curious if it's ever not a good time to start.
Jordan?
So filing before the protest deadline is the most important step of that equation. But if I understand the question, you're also asking if maybe you've had something that's been, let's say, materially wrong with your house for a
That's
few
right.
years.
Sure.
In that case, yeah, there's no penalty or harm, if you will, for letting us know about that, you know, a few years later. You know, yes, life happens. We understand that, which is part of why we try to make things so accessible. But if you've had, you know, a busted foundation for 3, 4, 5 years, even though it didn't happen this year, that is something that is useful.
That's good to know. And then, you know, again, if I'm also doing this, and what are some sources of data when you talk about, like, you know, neighboring homes and communities? Like, is there like a place that I should look at for home values? Would that be HAR? If I'm kind of looking at my neighbors, what their houses are appraised for, is that something I could do on my own?
I tell people that real estate agents are in the service-oriented business, so they want your business also. So I know a lot of people that will call their real estate agent that sold them their house and say, "Hey, look, those people at the appraisal district, I think they got the value incorrect. Can you please provide me some comps?" And that real estate agent would be glad to, you know, download some comps for that specific area. And then that property owner could utilize as evidence when they come in. I think, you know, going back to that question earlier, you know, we've got 7,000 residential neighborhoods in Harris County. And, you know, the one thing that I wanted to mention, if you look at two areas such as in West University and Memorial area, a lot of delineation is the school district that those kids would attend. And people don't realize that a house right across the street, because it's got the delineation from one school district to other, will have a total different price per square foot. And it's because the desirability of that owner wanting to be in that school district. And that's what makes this process very difficult also.
That makes sense. There's a question that is really interesting, and I've seen a few of these. What happens if you lose a protest? How can you appeal it? You know, what can you expect in that process?
Yeah, and well, first of all, I don't like the word lose. I'm sorry, Jennifer. We're not protecting anything. We're here. It's an opinion of value. It's an opinion of market value. And if you get three of the top appraisers in Jordan's office, the three of top appraisers in my office, we're going to look at the evidence. We're going to render an opinion, and it should be within a close margin. You know, you might have that house valued from 97 to 103,000. So it's not win or lose. It's what's the right value. So I'm sorry to, you know, people sat there and say, I lost my protest. No, you didn't lose your protest. But to exercise your rights after what we call the appraisal review board that we talked about earlier in this segment, where they go to the appraisal review board. After that, the property owner generally has 3 venues to what we call post ARB appeal. There's SOA, which is the State Office of Administrative Hearings. That is, my battery's running low on my PC now.
Oh no.
You've got binding arbitration, which is mainly used by property owners, and then you've got district court. And I know that we can talk about all 3 of them individually because all 3 of them have different deadlines. And I mean, they have the similar deadlines, but they have different costs. And in a nutshell, SOA is a little bit more formal than an appraisal review board hearing, but less formal than district court. District court's used for a lot of the commercial properties. Most property owners use binding arbitration. In fact, years ago, I went with my boss, Jim Robinson, who you all know, and we worked with the real estate community to get SOA. And it's a process. I think we've got 7,000 or 8,000 SOA hearings. I mean, not SOA hearings, binding arbitration accounts. And Jordan, if you want to elaborate on the binding arbitration, because it has a threshold of the cost, and the cost is the state takes $50 of that cost, but depending on the value of the property, it keeps going higher for the cost. But
Jordan, do you want to go ahead and, and take it from there?
Sure. So the cost for binding arbitration is set in statute. And in effect, what Roland was saying is there's a tiered system where the cost is dependent on the value of your property. There's a filing deadline for that process, and it's in some ways similar to an ARB, and that the appraisal district will provide evidence, the property owner provides evidence, and then in this case, the arbitrator weighs the evidence and makes a determination. And depending on who's the, I guess, kind of whose value is closest, is in effect the prevailing party for that. What we see for many folks is if they file a request for binding arbitration after an ARB hearing, those typically get resolved within 6 to 9 months from an ARB hearing because of the volume and the limited number of arbitrators in the greater Harris County area.
Okay. Sorry about that. I lost connectivity, and hopefully you didn't hear some of my bad words that I was saying. I can't
Oh,
no Wi-Fi, but I'm back. And Jordan is glad to have you here because you can help.
yes, we have two experts that are well versed in this, so that's the benefit of having both of y'all here. So a little bit, I'm seeing also a lot of this is like more of the inner workings of how things are done. Is there any like ding against you if you do protest and then you appeal and then you appeal? Is there any? No? Okay, so like slate is wiped clean, no kind of karma. Okay, that's good to know.
Every year stands on its own. And with regards to that, I think this year we in Harris County decreased over 500,000 of the 1.2 million residential properties. So it's that January 1st market value every year. And
right.
No, we do not ding you or anything like that. If you filed a protest, when I was the taxpayer liaison officer, I had property owners that would come in and they'd protest year in and year out because they said it's my right and I'm going to do it. And we welcome them when they show up.
That's fantastic. They're like old friends. You see them every year.
And Jennifer, I did see in the chat, somebody asked if there's a chance that somebody's value is increased if they file an appeal. There's actually a provision in the law that says that the ARB cannot increase their value unless the property owner requests for it to be increased. Every so often you have somebody with a unique circumstance that wants their value increased, but for the most part, that's not what people are coming to our offices for. And so they cannot have their value increased for, under normal circumstances.
That's great to hear.
That's an interesting point, because I remember when our state passed we're one of the last states that allow equity lending within your property. And a lot of states were using our market value because our statute's 100% of market value. So the banks and savings and loans were using our value. So we had a lot of people coming in, I want my value increased from this to this, which of course, there's independent appraisals, but a lot of the banks back then were using our market value. And we put 2 and 2 to figure out why they were all wanting their values increased.
So we are slowly winding down here. I know so many of these questions sound like very specific circumstances too. They're, very specific homes. And so you mentioned, Roland, at some point, outreach programs, and someone actually asked specifically about this. So if they have, can you speak to an outreach program? Is there a situation where could they call up someone in your office and ask questions, or can you explain more about that?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing that I'd mention is if a property owner's got a specific question with their property, they can come into my office at 13013 Northwest Freeway. They can come in this afternoon, tomorrow, as long as they do it Monday through Friday when we're open, and they can meet with an appraiser. The outreach programs that we have going on right now, we've got rendition workshop outreach programs, and those are the ones that we use for people that have business personal property, and we help them fill out their rendition, and that's a whole different topic. But then we have some that are specific to exemptions, and then we have some that are just overall, and I don't know what Jordan does, but at any one of them, they can at least talk to someone to get some information with regards to their exemption and have some of the questions that might be specific to their property. I go out and do a lot of public speaking engagements myself, and when property owner comes up and says something specific about their property, sometimes I have to call my office and get onto our property record card to see what is on there compared to what they're telling me. So yes, we welcome the one-on-one with appraisers, either at the outreach or in the office.
Fantastic. And Jordan, I don't know if you have anything to add to that for Fort Brand.
Yeah, we have very similar programs. I was fortunate enough to work with Roland for a number of years, and I'm not embarrassed to say that we're happy to borrow the best ideas from other places. And so we have a program that's largely modeled on HCADs. We do workshops, a lot of engagement. We do a lot of meetings with homeowners associations or neighborhood groups. On our website, there's an ability to request for somebody to come out and speak at those type of gatherings. We also have completely redone our website over the last few years, and we have a robust series of FAQs and Q&As. We also, every year we post a year-specific webpage on our site that walks people through both the appraisal process, but also what we looked at in the Fort Bend market. And that's going to be fbcad.org/2024 values, because we want to make sure that we are transparent, and that people have a sense of what we're looking at, and we want to make sure that there's that dialogue there. So we welcome the feedback, we welcome the communication, and if folks have questions, they can also send an email to info@fbcad.org. This is our busy year, so it may take us a day or two, sometimes a bit more, but we definitely are responsive to those.
That's fantastic. So this is a live event, folks. You could see we lost Roland again. Hopefully he rejoins us in a little bit, but I think we're actually at time. It's too bad I wanted to send Roland off, but Jordan, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, readers, for tuning in. We do, I see this as a common question too. Will a recording of this session be recorded? Yes, we will publish a recording of the session on YouTube, and we'll have it in an article too. And so actually seeing so many great questions here, we might actually do like a frequently asked questions sort of thing. Claire, maybe kind of go through everyone's questions and see. But we will have this up and running for everyone to view after the event. So thank you again, Jordan, for your time. Thank you, Claire, and have a great rest of the day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.